Welcome to Cultivate the Ordinary podcast, curious conversations for the anxious, frustrated, dejected, and bored. I'm Travis.
And I'm Jessie. So often we're held captive by screens, schedules, and media that's mind-numbing and polarizing. This leaves us seeing dimly through a fog. We want to spark more imagination and a better awareness of God's presence in the everyday.
Join us on a fun journey of discovery and curiosity as we look at the ordinary through the lenses of joy, wonder, beauty, and hope. Welcome to the podcast today. We are going to discuss marriage and other relationships in conflict and navigating through some of that. And this is a very near and dear topic to us. It's been very relevant lately. Clint Eastwood once said that they say marriages are made in heaven, but so is thunder and lightning. How is that? Does that hit home or?
Yes, absolutely.
H.L. Mencken once said that a man may be a fool and not know it, but not if he's married. We're keenly aware, aren't we, guys?
You're going to know it.
Keenly aware. So, but what Jess and I like to say, as we kind of set this up and talk about conflict and marriage and relationships, is that we really struggle with conflict together. We to walk through it in healthy ways. A lot of times it feels for us like it's damage control later, and then and I know it's a common experience for a lot of people that would probably say, we can have long times of not talking or different things or whatever the fallout is, and we all have our patterns, or even some of us, we have ways of maybe
we are not experts by any means on this topic of navigating conflict, but we have learned some things along the way as we've looked at ourselves, become more aware, and started practicing as much as we can, not staying stuck.
Yeah.
Because conflicts happen. It's like part of life. Like we're all going to hit that wall of miscommunication or hurt feelings, all kinds of things.
Yeah. I almost feel like when I look at it, like you and I it's more like we're survivors.
We're surviving.
Surviving. Present tense.
Right.
And we're
moving through.
And we're messengers. Messengers to what we're learning and trying to do.
Right.
So, yep. So the idea here is we're going to have this first episode it's going to be a 2-part series. This first one's going to be sort of centered around conflict. You have going over things like what is wrong, becoming more aware, what are our modes of conflict and how we tend to relate in conflict. And then, so that'll kind of be the theme of our discussion, our conversation today. And then the part 2 of this will be more on connection. You want to say anything about the connection side or?
Yeah, just really looking forward that after today, this is step 1, and then the importance of attunement and repair, and what does that look like in relationships as a discussion next time.
Yeah. So I thought it'd be kind of funny or fun to kick it off too with just bad marriage advice, but just maybe let's just say one thing. And maybe this isn't really funny, it was just bad advice, but
there's a lot of bad marriage
advice. There's a lot of, and that would be a whole nother thing. Yeah. So I guess I just oversold it right there. It's one, so pressure on you because you're the one that's going to give us some cliche bad marriage advice. So if there's one thing you have heard over and over again or whatever that you're like, that's kind of bad, what is it? Yeah.
One of the things I've heard for years and really, believed it in a different way was, in Ephesians it talks about like, do not let the sun go down on your anger and give no opportunity to the devil. And, I think that can be interpreted like, don't go to bed angry. Like, don't, you have to finish the conflict before you go to bed. And I don't think that practically, when you're up till like 12:30 at night still arguing, like, are you, rested and rational enough to be able to not let the devil have a foothold. Sometimes pushing pause. I think that the bad advice is don't go to bed angry. I think if you need to push pause on the conflict and let your anger rest, and then come back to it.
So, yeah, because it can take quite a while to get resolution, just to even understand or to break it down, and it's not easy to press pause.
No,
I mean, I would say especially for you, I feel like I can easily right? Isn't that a deal?
Yeah, because I want that repair,
Jess, it's like
reconnection.
12. Why are we still? Can we not break this down? Like I can barely even think right now, right?
But then you don't want to come back to it.
Well, that's my problem. That's avoidance and not.
Yep.
So, but we'll get into more later how I don't really avoid conflict, but sometimes later I avoid, I guess. So anyway, yeah.
So, marriage is complicated, like we've said. There's a quote that says, marriage is when a man and a woman become one, and the trouble starts when they try to decide which one.
Yeah. That's funny. Like who gets the...
Yeah, which way is going to be the right way, mine or yours?
The pendulum's going to swing, yeah.
Yeah, and that really embodies the idea of conflict, because it really is. It's where I have my way that I'm wired, and you have your way, and we wish it would just go our way all the time, and it can't, and you and I talk about with Shiny Eyes and this podcast and stuff, the four kind of values of joy, tears, beauty, and hope. And I think that perfectly reflects kind of some of the stages of every marriage, a good marriage.
Right.
Obviously, there's some marriages that end in the tears stage, but joy is that early relationship. You kind of overlook disagreements, and you overlook differences, and I think that things aren't as big. And then as you have kids and things get more complicated, there's just more to have conflict about. And so that tears stage is what we're talking about today. It's the conflict. It's the fighting through. And sometimes people don't fight, and that's still conflict.
Right.
But then the hope is that we can next time talk about the beauty of that connection, reconnection, restoration, repair.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, so what if you think back, can you remember when we first got married, or before that? Was there a major point of conflict, or
like our first conflict?
Yeah. Do you have?
Yeah, I remember it very clearly. So before we were even a couple, we had a pretty significant miscommunication that was pretty jarring. Do you want to tell it?
And it would set the course for
right.
years to come of sort of a predictor of stuff. No, I mean, you add in, but yeah, basically from my situation going into, even I guess before we were officially dating, I had come out of a previous marriage where the rug was pulled out, and just completely hurt and left. My previous spouse had just left the marriage. So the follow to that for me was 2 years of rediscovering being single and trying to get my my own identity back, and trying to understand and then just to heal from the pain of loss and how all that went down. So it had been about 2 years before you and I, I guess met online, and we're hanging out one night, and we had been together a few times, just hanging out and having fun, and
just friends.
You're starting to wonder, okay, what's going on here? What is this? Define.
Right. I'm fairly certain that we're moving towards a relationship, but yet there hasn't been a conversation about, what does he want? What do I want? Like, what are we doing here? Are we We're going to start dating.
Yeah.
And so I'm fumbling through trying to figure out how he's feeling. You know, I care so much about how people feel. And I asked the question, I said, there's this other guy in my life that been hanging out. I knew him before I knew you, and I just curious where things are going with us, because I want to know, like, what, I think I said, like, what to tell this other guy, you know, like, was just trying to broach the topic.
Right. And so my then perspective is, okay, coming from a situation where rug pulled out, sort of this other dynamic of someone else involved and that kind of thing, it was like whoa, this is okay. So she's already kind of what I felt like is deciding between two guys here, and like, is this, and I mean, so I just remember, and again, this comes out of my pain and my, self-protection, that my initial response, I mean, it was just like, are you kidding? I'm like, I'm not an option on a menu. Like, what did I say? I'm not an option on a menu.
Yes.
And I meant it. Like you're...
Like, how could you ask me that?
Yeah, like, are you serious? And so, anyway, make this short here, but basically you then walk away crying and feeling like, oh my gosh, I ruined this. What did I say? Why did I say that? I'm going, well...
Dodge that bullet.
Dodge that bullet. So, and then, yeah, I guess...
Well, and I was so confused because my goal in the conversation was to say, hey, and I didn't get to it because he kind of interjected, was to say, hey, I don't want to, like, spend time with this other guy if, like, you and I are headed towards dating because, like, I like you. But it was hard for me to, like, be clear.
Right. And then
because I was being self-protective too.
For sure. And then so for me, I'm hearing, well, this other person's lingering. They're in the shadows. And that was what I've come,
The threat.
The threat. So it was like, yeah, you're exactly who I'm not going to be dating. Right. And this confirmed it. Yeah. But then coming back together.
And that's the story.
Right.
That's part of your story.
Right. So, but then coming back together and then like, oh my gosh, this is what I meant. This is what, So we both brought...
So that was our first major conflict, that that breakdown in communication and that fear.
Yeah.
But then we did come back together and really got some understanding, and then we started dating, and it was like, okay, we've arrived.
Yeah.
We are a couple. So we got through it.
Yeah. So kind of moving into sort of what we're learning and what we're trying to apply to our lives, our marriage and stuff, as it has to do with conflict, is so John Gottman talks about 3 basic conflict styles in the way people handle a conflict. There's conflict minimizers, there's the volatile situations, and then the validating. And so it's important in matches how we handle stress. So no better or worse, but being aware of your response to stress is helpful.
Yeah.
So some of us are wired to fight, some flight, and then some freeze, and that kind of is in line with those things. So you want to say anything more about that, the volatility and validating?
Which one are you?
I would be volatile.
That's correct.
Correct. Right answer. So what are you?
I think I'm a mix of validating first, but then I can be pretty reactive and volatile at times. So that's where all of our sparks.
So real quick, explain. So a minimizer is someone that's trying to constantly brush conflict under the rug.
Right.
Avoiding it at all costs.
It's kind of the flight.
Okay, so then volatile is the volcano. The fight. Like, let's gloves on. Let's go.
Mm-hmm. And then validating would be like freeze or fawn. It's more appeasing. I think that's my initial. Is I just want to like.
Gosh, to put on some boxing gloves.
Go away.
So I don't know. I mean, you just take longer to lace up.
Well, you wind it up with the intensity, and then I'm like, all right,
And
fine.
then I look over and you're taping.
Let's
You're
fight.
you're getting the hands taped before the...
What happens in Fight Club stays in Fight Club.
Well, that's, I guess, so.
Oh, no. In reality, though, I mean, Brene Brown says a lot about the stories that we hear, that we tell ourselves. She says, when something hard happens, our brain begs for a story. If you give your brain a story, it rewards you with calm. Crucially, though, the brain is so set on removing the ambiguity and uncertainty you're facing that it will reward you regardless of the accuracy of the story. So, like, we're meaning makers. Like, we make sense of things, and it's based on our past experiences and the information that we have available to us. So,
yeah. So, the word story, then, in this case, is neutral. And sometimes true, sometimes fiction. There's always an element of truth in fiction, but the language is less threatening to use the word story.
Yeah, like the way she frames it in a lot of her stuff is the story that I'm telling myself right now is, like, when you're talking to somebody in conflict, and you know, it gives that neutral ground to say, like, I understand it might be inaccurate. Like, it's just the story inside of me. I'm not blaming you, you know?
Sure. Okay. So then kind of the takeaway from that I know you've kind of worked on and some of the stuff with coaching relationships and marriages is that there are three sort of types of stories that we bring into our response to conflict. Stress stories, relational stories, and personality stories.
Yeah.
So starting with the first one, stress, I mean, what are the stories then that get triggered in you during conflict? Like...
Me? You're asking me?
Yeah, yeah.
Some ones that come to mind are things like I cannot be run over or interrupted. Don't want to be ignored. You know, I think about things you and I have talked about, and, you know, the don't tell me what to do kind of story. Like, I need to be in control of myself.
Right.
That's a dominant story. Can you think of any others?
Yeah, I mean, like, what would my response be in that, or?
Well, do you have any other
That I
kind
would
of
feel?
when you feel stress of conflict? Like, is there a story that you think of that you have to protect against?
Yeah, I think I would lean into, you know, don't tell me what to do is ready to be, you know, defended. I probably do have a struggle then around, like, guilt and shame, that it's easy to, like, feel that added defensiveness of, like
the story says I'm always wrong.
Or I can never do
enough
to, you know, or I'm always, you know, whatever.
Right.
Like I know, like, I struggle with anger, and so I bring a low level of anger almost to life, and that's part of my wounding and the way I wrongly often cope. But I mean, it's just I'm very gut reactive, and so my impulse is to sort of already just have sort of a just fight a stress response, a you know, kind of a armed up response. It's hard for me, especially the way I'm wired, I think, to, you know, as an argument's kicking up or it's starting to feel like it's I'm really working right now on just breathing, being more self-aware.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because it makes me think about just the way that God designed our brains and our bodies to work in stress is to protect us from, like, actual danger. You know, we don't often, like, everything happens so fast when we're triggered or we're in stress. You know, we don't really realize that we're acting as if it's something almost dangerous that we have to protect ourselves against. But, like, our body feels that way, but these are just emotional threats, and often inaccurate. Right. You know, and what you talk about with the breathing is regulating. That's a word just that means calming yourself.
Yeah.
Like, and when you do that, you are now using a part of your brain that allows you to think clearly and problem solve and be like hopeful and creative and feel present and safe and all those things. When you're dysregulated, it's like all of the stories are not correct. Like they're lies essentially, you know. So God designed that system to protect us in real danger.
Right.
But I think because of like the fallen world and like it just, you
It's
know,
our sin. It's
misfiring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is a stressful part of conflict for you, or is there any other ways that it manifests to where?
For me, in my body, because I probably do more of the freeze initially, and I did for years. I'm doing better about expressing and moving through and talking about like stuff with you or whoever. But for years, I just like would repress like frustrations or sadness or whatever. And I had all this physical pain that showed up like, 4 years ago. Had sciatic pain and I could barely walk. And it was just, I was constantly stretching and trying to figure out how to manage my pain until I realized, you know, a lot of it was emotional. And when I started doing this type of work, it was being able to move through emotions meant I didn't hold contractions in my body, and the muscle tension started to lessen.
Right.
So that's, for me, stress is, I hold it.
Yeah.
So what are some types of, you know, relational stories? Like if you think of you versus me, or how connected or disconnected we are, what do you think about?
So like I tend to be more avoidant in like, I guess if we're talking attachment or
like what, like avoiding doing the dishes? Or
no,
what do you mean by that?
man, you're a comedian. You'll be here all day, right? Selling my latest book in the back.
Explain to me what you mean by avoidant.
I'm just I don't avoid fights. I'm very much enter conflict. That's how I'm wired. Enneagram 8 Challenger, if you know much about that. In fact, sometimes I actually do feel like sort of the conflict and the fight is a way to connect. That's a weird kind of thing for people, but there's, I guess, a respect there, and also like kind of an energy, like a passion that's like, hey, you know, it's like.
So then why in that case, like what is the avoidant part? What are you avoiding in our relationship? Like what do you think that's about?
So that's a good, to distinguish, because I'm not avoiding the challenge or the fight itself. Like some would actually want to just avoid conflict. That's not me, but I guess where I'm avoiding is then, I guess the vulnerability to, and it is pride, and we all can struggle with that in conflict, like who's first to say sorry, things like that. But I guess to come back and reconnect, it doesn't feel.
So your attachment style is more avoidant, which just means that independence is easier, and to feel safe, you really do kind of need to disconnect and like process internally.
But where we really then struggle is then that's my kind of go-to. Like I would want to, you know, if our conflict isn't resolving and it's going and it's kind of, we probably both need a break for a while or something. I would put up a wall or need my space to go kind of hopefully find my heart. But then I think the problem there is you more anxious, needing that reconnection.
Yeah.
Probably quick if possible, or signs to show. But then I often feel like I'm too hurt sometimes too to like want to. So then we have this like spin out of, okay,
right,
I felt hurt, so there's part of me right now, I don't want to be near you. I love you, but right now I don't like you.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and so then what happens then in that tension of like who makes the first move back?
Yeah.
And I think that's where, you know,
yeah,
there's no easy answer here. I mean, I think the
story for that, and it's really common, it's not always the case to have one person that's a little bit more of that distancer or avoidant, one person that's maybe a little bit more of the pursuer or the anxious attacher. But and then that would be me, like you said, is that I want that reconnection. I want resolution. I want to feel like we're good. But then I don't give you your space, and if that's the case, then it aggravates the dance.
Right. Sure.
So the stories are like, I need to do this or I need to do that, and you need to have your space, and I need to fix this, or I need to, make sure he's not mad at me. That's the message.
Right.
So
kind of the last category I guess we talked about here is personality stories. Like, and how does personality affect our conflict? And so the way we process, either through our head or heart, or like I talked about, gut reactions, kind of that type of thing. What would you say to that? How does personality affect conflict?
Well, yeah, there's so many different personality typing systems out there that, that tell you how you are wired. But like you and I really appreciate some of the wisdom of the Enneagram, because it, you have these different groups, like the head, heart, and gut is intelligence centers. It's how you understand your world. You process information, and then that's how you react and kind of respond through that center dominantly. Not that you don't use all three, thinking, feeling, and doing, but when you know your kind of dominant center, like I'm more of a heart center type person, a lot about emotions and feelings, and you're more reactions and doing and fixing and that sort of a thing. That lens helps you kind of unpack, okay, in this situation, I'm trying to help. I'm trying to do what I think she wants me to do. And I'm interpreting and filtering a circumstance through feelings.
Right.
And that's where the misconnection happens a lot of times. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like sometimes as far as for me doing, is the first way to reconnect after a big fight or through conflict is I don't know. Like, I guess I want to say, like, I often don't feel like I have the words of, like, the feelings that, to go into the feeling level. So I would be more inclined to want to just come and give you a hug, but then there's times I'm fighting against that too, I just feel so often disarmed of, like,
yeah. We talked about this the other day on our walk. The reality is like what you just described. You're trying to fix the conflict by meeting me in my emotion, but that's where you're more repressed. Like, you're not in touch with your emotions. And I try to do the same thing for you, but the beauty of this is with personality is that it's often, if you get me out of my feelings by, doing, we have a project we work on together, or, hey, come listen to this song, or, it's just like there's, a way we can kind of in our gifts and in our wiring, bring that to the other person, to offer that to them, because that's what we're good at, instead of trying to do what they think, we need.
Yeah.
So.
And that's where things can get gray too, is we're trying to. So.
Yeah. So there's a funny quote. It says, marriage is full of surprises, but it's mostly just asking each other, do you have to do that right now? And then we're surprised by, magically, they're really unhappy with us.
Mm-hmm.
Can you relate?
Yeah. Just a little.
Right. So there's like a lot of little quirks and judgments that we come up with. But we want to leave you guys with just a few tools, before we move into next time when we talk about connection. But in conflict, one of the best things that works and sounds simple, but it's a lot harder to do than what you would think, you just have to practice it a lot, is a pause, press pause, stop, and there's an acronym that I use. It's stop, think, observe, pattern. And when you can press pause for a second, kind of mentally step back and view yourself from a place of like awareness and observation, that you have patterns happening here. You have these stories, like, and then what is the story that you're telling yourself? Is it about the stress? Is it about the relationship? Or is it just part of your personality differences? Like,
Right.
just remembering those three ways we will miss each other. And if it's just those things and you can kind of communicate those things, or come back to it, or in that pause, like we said, bring in something like a regulating tool, like with breathing, or, you know, go for a walk.
Yeah.
You know, something like that.
Yeah.
It's crucial. It really is.
Yeah. Well, and I was just going to add one last thing too, that I know that we've done and we should all do more. And I think it's something that like we found ourselves like last ditch thing, and it shouldn't get to this as much as it often feels like it does, but just like, let's just pray. Like right now, like we've got nothing left.
Right.
And we don't, like, we're in such a mess. We're in a deep, dark hole. We can't, like, let's just pray.
Right.
And even that act of prayer is both being vulnerable. There's repentance there, but also, like, I guess there's solidarity that happens because we're joining in that moment
Vulnerability.
before God. But we're like, that's a new movement in that moment of fighting, of like joining together.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So what makes you hopeful that there's areas of work and cultivation with conflict and marriage and relationships? I mean, what gives you hope in this, that we can just keep all of us tilling the soil around this and hoping something...
It's just that definition of hope, that seeing beyond things to, you know, we said joy, tears, beauty, hope. Hope is like that stage in marriage. It's the new creation. It's like, okay, we've gone through the tears and we've worked into the restoration and the beauty of, you know, pursuing each other and looking at our stuff and doing our work. That new creation is like with God we have become new and become transformed, and, you know, and we will always be working towards that. That's not like a final, like, place where you arrive.
Yeah.
But we can see beyond the present conflict that we're having.
Love it. Yeah. So, some additional resources to share?
Yeah, I mean, you and I on the guidedpace.com website, I mean, there's a few resources, there's videos, things like that. We mentioned regulating resources, we mentioned stress response. There's some videos that take you there. We have some sort of PDFs of, you know, what to do with triggers. There's this thing called the V diagram to kind of like go through thinking, feeling, and doing, and then how to re-engage or connect. More for yourself, but it works in relationships too. So you just go to guidedpace.com and we'll put that in the show notes. And then if you just need some additional help, I mean, I offer some coaching as well as groups on this resilience building. If this is difficult to do by yourself. And then marriage, you know, we do couples.
Well, I know, just here's a plug for you, but as your husband, but also just someone that admires what you do in helping people. I just know that I've heard a lot of awesome feedback from people that have really gotten help from your coaching and stuff. So, I think you see so much possibility that people can, when they lose hope, kind of lose. But that's one of your gifts. So, take us out with a good final quote if you have something.
Yeah. I love this one. So Susan Sarandon actually said this. She said, "We need a witness in our lives. Marriage is, your life will not go unnoticed because I will notice it. Your life will not go unwitnessed because I will be your witness." So I think that really speaks to what we do for one another in marriage and relationships of any kind.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, very cool. Well, thanks so much for joining our conversation today on conflict and trying to navigate that. Hopefully, there was something in this that sparked your imagination or gave you a tip or two on something to consider or try, as you are trying to manage and navigate conflict in marriage and other relationships. Really appreciate your support. If you like the podcast, you can help more people find it and help us out by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a review. Really grateful for that. Join us next time, and we will be talking about connection and as it relates to marriage and relationships. Have a great day.